"Isabel, have you lost your mind?" Her father's voice echoed through the grand hall, filled with fury and disbelief, moments after the announcement that had just shaken every guest to the core. All eyes turned to the young heiress, still standing in the center of the chandelier-lit ballroom. The 20 millionaire suitors remained in an uncomfortable line, some with expressions of anger, others trying to hide their humiliation. Isabel was breathing heavily, her heart pounding, but she kept her chin high. "I'm not marrying any of them," she repeated firmly, though her fingers trembled slightly as they clutched the fabric of her silver gown. "I won't be used as a piece on a chessboard." A murmur spread through the crowd of New York's elite. Glasses clinked, fans unfolded, and whispers swept through the room like wildfire. Her father, Henry Hayes, a real estate tycoon, felt his blood boil. "Isabel, you're making a fool of yourself. Do you realize the scandal you've caused?" He stepped toward her, forcing a smile for the cameras of the reporters capturing every second. "This engagement was strategic. You have no idea what's at stake." She stepped back, gasping, as if the air in the ballroom had become too heavy. The muffled laughter, the disapproving glances, and the nauseating scent of the flowers overwhelmed her. Without another word, Isabel ripped the tiara from her head, tossed it onto a table, and walked toward the exit. Her heels struck the marble with purpose, though inside she felt like she was falling apart. One of the suitors, humiliated, muttered loud enough to be heard, "Arrogant, always has been." Isabel didn't look back. She pushed open the golden doors and stepped out into the cold Manhattan night. The limousine was waiting at the entrance. The private driver rushed to open the door, but she raised her hand, refusing his help. She got in on her own, slamming the door shut. "Just drive, now," she ordered, without even looking at the driver. The car pulled away, gliding down Fifth Avenue, lit up with city lights. The world outside flashed by like snapshots from a life she no longer wanted to live. Leaning back against the leather seat, Isabel closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the image of 20 men, lined up like trophies on display. Suddenly, a metallic clank broke the silence. The car slowed, and the driver pulled over to the curb. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm afraid the engine has malfunctioned. I'll call the company's mechanic right away." Isabel sighed in frustration. The heavy dress, the discomfort, and the suffocating sense of entrapment only heightened her irritation. She opened the door and stepped out, despite the freezing night air. "No, don't bother. I just want to get home." As the driver made the call, trying to sort things out, a simple, slightly beat-up car pulled up a few yards away. The man behind the wheel leaned out the window. "Do you need help?" he asked in a firm but friendly voice. Isabel looked up. The man had tousled brown hair, tired eyes, and wore a plain, long-sleeved shirt. He didn't look like someone used to being in luxury neighborhoods. "No, thank you. Everything's under control," she replied curtly, used to brushing off strangers. Before he could say anything else, a child's voice piped up from the back seat. "Daddy, is the lady sad?" Isabel blinked, surprised. In the back seat, a wide-eyed boy stared at her, clutching a toy car in his arms. The man smiled awkwardly, embarrassed by his son's bluntness. "Jake, it's not polite to interrupt." But Isabel was already moving closer. Her cold heart seemed to thaw a little at the child's simple words. The boy had a sweet smile, and there was something about him that cracked the ice wall she had built over the years. "No, he's not wrong," she murmured, crouching slightly to meet the child at eye level. "Maybe I am a little sad." Jake tilted his head. "Daddy always says that when you're sad, you need pancakes. Pancakes fix everything." Isabel let out a soft, unexpected laugh, light and genuine. It had been a long time since she'd laughed at something so simple. The limousine driver came rushing back. "Mrs. Hayes, the company is sending another car, but it might take a while." Before she could respond, the man in the simple car stood up and opened the passenger door. "I can give you a ride wherever you need. It's not a limo, but it runs." Isabel hesitated. Her instinct was to say no, but her eyes drifted back to Jake, who smiled at her with quiet confidence, as if he had already chosen her as a friend. "Okay, just to my penthouse," she said at last, surprising even herself. She got into the modest car, feeling the stark contrast between the worn seat and the luxury she had just walked away from. Jake clapped his hands excitedly. "See, Daddy? Now there's 3 of us in the car." The man gave a shy smile and extended his hand. "I'm Brian." "Isabel," she replied, still a bit reserved, but already feeling that something in her life had changed forever the moment that car pulled up to the curb. "Dad, my chest is making that noise again," Jake whispered, clutching his t-shirt as the dry, stubborn cough returned. Brian was on his feet before even turning on the light. He always woke up at the first sign of wheezing, as if his body had developed an internal alarm. He opened the drawer of the makeshift dresser, a repurposed old bookshelf, and pulled out the spacer and inhaler. Sitting on the edge of the wooden bed, he gently pulled the boy close and fit the mask over his warm little face. "Breathe with me, champ. Slow. 1, 2. He counted softly, matching the rhythm with a hand on Jake's chest, who followed with wide, trusting eyes. The small bedroom in their Queen's apartment smelled of cheap detergent and yesterday's coffee. Through the window came the distant rumble of the train, and closer still, the steady dripping of the kitchen sink Brian hadn't managed to fix yet. His eyes never left his son, watching every move, as if the rest of the world could wait until the air flowed freely again. "Better?" he asked after a few minutes, carefully removing the mask. Jake nodded, the coughing now reduced to a low grumble in his throat. "Better? You're the best doctor in the world." "That's because you haven't met Dr. Patel," Brian smiled, kissing the boy's forehead. "But I'll accept the title for today. Time to get up. School doesn't wait for heroes." The narrow kitchen filled with the sound of a scraping pan and the pop of the toaster. Brian scrambled eggs with one hand and checked the Ride app with the other. A row of bills was pinned to the fridge with a magnet. Rent highlighted in red, community school payments for Jake. A prescription with the cost underlined 3 times. "Pancakes?" Jake appeared holding his toy car, waving like he was introducing a celebrity guest. "Today is Championship Omelette Day." Brian struck a game show host pose, grabbed the plate, and flipped the omelette with a dramatic flick of the wrist. It nearly hit the ceiling. "Whoa!" That almost became ceiling omelette. Jake laughed, one of those laughs that felt like opening windows in a stuffy apartment. "Dad, you need more practice." "I need a sponsor. That's what I need. Maybe when your soccer team signs you." He set the plate in front of Jake and pulled out a chair. "Eat up, then we'll check that your inhaler's in your backpack." "Yes, sir." The "sir" made Brian laugh again, but as Jake looked down to eat, Brian cast a glance at the fridge and felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Widowed for 3 years, he had learned to stretch hours like rubber bands, hoping they wouldn't snap. He drove ride shares during the day, delivered packages some evenings, and on Thursday nights picked up a shift fixing things at a friend's bar. The cost of Jake's health plan had gone up. The school had quietly reminded him about late tuition, and the maintenance medication was too expensive to argue over. All he wanted was to avoid the ER and those cold overnight hours sitting on hard plastic chairs. "Dad?" Jake poked his arm. "You were thinking..." "That kind of thinking where you go quiet." "I was thinking about soccer practice on Saturday." "You think it'll rain?" He improvised, smiling again. "Eat everything. If we get there early, Ms. Patel might let you pick the marker color for today's activity." After breakfast came the military routine. Check the backpack. Make sure the extra inhaler was in the side pocket. Pack a water bottle. Put on the jacket even though Jake insisted. I don't need it, Dad. It's not cold. Brian tied his son's sneakers and tucked the teacher's note into his own jacket pocket. We need to talk about tuition. It stung to read it again. They hustled down the stairs, passing a neighbor who waved and complained about the hot water, and the doorman, bleary-eyed, watching the news on low volume. Outside, the autumn wind nipped at their ears. Brian's car, a tired old sedan with chipped paint and a door that wouldn't open from the inside, waited loyally like an old dog. "Hop in, Captain." He opened the passenger door for Jake. "Seatbelt, please. If the commander sees, I'll get my ear pulled." "You're the commander, Dad." "True. So, buckle up, soldier." They laughed again, and Brian took a deep breath before turning the key. The engine groaned but started. He dropped Jake at school, waited until his son walked through the gate. He always waited, and then opened the ride app. First call, a rushed couple in Midtown. Second, a chatty older man giving unsolicited investment advice. Third, 3 college kids who left chip crumbs on the back seat. Fourth, a woman with groceries. Brian carried the bags, refused a tip, and got a smile instead. The hours ticked by, dragging the invisible rent clock along. At 11, a different ping lit up his phone, a message through the app. "Hi, this is Isabel. Hope you're well. I was your passenger last night. Could you drive me to the Upper East Side at 1 p.m.? Can I schedule?" Brian pulled into a loading zone, needing to double-check if he read that right. Her last name had been splashed across every headline that morning. The heiress who turned down 20 suitors in front of everyone. He didn't follow gossip, but the headlines popped up anyway. Heiress causes scene at gala. Hayes family in turmoil. Who was the driver who saved the night? That last one made him laugh out loud. "Sure," he typed back, keeping his tone professional. "I can be at your address by 12:50. Can you confirm?" The reply came instantly. "Confirmed. Thanks for stopping last night. And sorry for the short notice." Brian pocketed the phone, adjusted the rearview mirror, and tried not to think about how her zip code compared to the school bill. He continued rides until it was time, and during a red light, he called Jake's school. "Mr. Turner?" The secretary answered kindly. "Everything okay?" "Yes, all good. I can come by this afternoon to talk about—" He took a breath. "The tuition. I'm working it out." "Of course, we understand." Her voice was familiar and warm, the kind that said this many times a day but without sarcasm. "What matters most is Jake's well-being. He's a sweetheart." "He really is," Brian smiled, only then realizing he was smiling in Lexington Avenue traffic, a small miracle. At 12:47, he was parked outside Isabel's building. The lobby had 12-foot ceilings and 2 columns like ancient temples. Brian shut off the engine, smoothed the dashboard like he was asking it to behave, and texted, "I'm here." It wasn't long before the revolving door spun and Isabel stepped out. No tiara, no silver gown, just a simple coat and sunglasses that didn't quite hide the impatience. "Hi," she said, sliding into the back seat, setting a small purse on her lap. "Sorry for being 3 minutes late. My elevator decided to stop on every floor." "Fancy elevators do that," Brian joked, not looking at her too long in the mirror. "They want to remind you on every floor how important you are. And your car wants to remind me it has personality," she said, touching the window, which vibrated slightly with the engine. "It hums like those massage chairs at the mall." "It's a premium service," he deadpanned. "Urban vibrotherapy, optional surcharge." She laughed, a short, unguarded laugh, the kind that sounded like she was relearning how. Brian noticed her tired expression, the chin held high out of habit, not pride, and took Park Avenue. "Thanks for last night," she said, taking off her glasses and staring at her blurred reflection in the window. "I just needed to get out of there." I figured, he kept his tone light. No one flees a perfect party if they're having a good time. Perfect for photos, maybe. Isabel rested her elbow on the door. Not for real people. Sorry, I'm rambling. Where's Jake today? The question came so naturally that Brian hesitated for a beat. He wasn't used to passengers remembering his son. School, art day. If all goes well, he'll come home with paint all over his hands and a new drawing for the dashboard. You put his drawings here? She leaned forward, noticing the pieces taped to the console. A lopsided sun, a car with oval wheels, a stick figure that vaguely resembled a superhero. Turner Gallery, he said proudly. Permanent exhibit, by invitation only. I'm honored, Isabel smiled, and it wasn't the polished gala smile. You raise him on your own. Has it been long? 3 years, he answered without drama. His mum passed. Since then we've been a team. I drive, he handles weather and food logistics. Tells me when it'll rain and when pancakes are needed. Pancakes are always needed. She nodded with the seriousness of someone who truly understood. In my world, they replace boardroom decisions. In mine, they replace bad medicine, Brian chuckled. But the laughter hit a topic he usually avoided. Well, not replace, they help. Isabel noticed the crack. She looked at the drawings, the strap of the child's backpack, the water bottle labeled Jake. But she saw in a flash a life stitched together with care and tape. He has asthma, doesn't he? She asked gently, without flinching. He does, Brian confirmed, hands steady on the wheel. We've learned the drill. Inhaler, spacer, appointments, thermal wrap in winter, and bills, lots of bills. But he's tough. The Suitors, she forced the word and rolled her eyes. Never mentioned anything close to thermal wraps. It was always about jets, stocks, resorts. I don't even know what I like, because it was always about what looked good in photos. So what do you like? Brian tossed the question lightly, as if returning a ball, never staring too long so he wouldn't miss his exit. Isabel cracked the window, just enough to breathe something that wasn't perfume or recycled air. People who talk to me like I'm a person, laughing at dumb stuff. And she searched for something tangible. Oversized sweaters on Sundays. I think I like sweaters. Sweaters are a noble cause. He nodded solemnly. I almost ran for president of the sweater committee, but Jake vetoed it, says hoodies are the future. Hoodies win, she declared, and they laughed together. Brian's phone buzzed. Jake's school. He gave a quick glance. Sorry, I have to answer. Always do. Of course. She straightened up, eyes alert like she knew this scene. Hello? Brian already braced himself. Mr. Turner, it's Ms. Patel. Just letting you know today's art project uses tempera paint. We're ventilating the room. Jake's doing great, no symptoms, just confirming the inhalers in his backpack. It is side pocket, he exhaled, warmth returning to his voice. Thanks for checking, Ms. Patel. He's excited, said today he's painting a car that drives to space. She chuckled. Have a good day. You too. He hung up and saw Isabel watching him. She had noticed the glow in his eyes that always appeared when he talked about his son. It was something she hadn't seen in any of those 20 men lined up beside champagne flutes and hidden contracts. You light up when you talk about him, she said, unfiltered, like she'd just discovered something. No one in my circle talks like that. Everyone talks about themselves, how they'll look, how they'll be photographed. Never is he okay. Never is the inhaler in the bag. In my circle, Brian smirked, a selfie is checking if your kid's nose is clean before the school picture. Not that I get it right. Once dropped him off with hair that looked like a bird's nest. Me too, Isabel said, surprised to admit it. Last time I did my own hair without a stylist, I looked like a storm hit me. So we have that in common, he teased. Hair hurricanes. The car neared their destination, Upper East Side streets like polished dioramas. Isabel pointed to a smaller, elegant building where a friend had a studio. She looked out the window and for a second didn't want to get out. The conversation, full of dry humor and quiet kindness, had soothed her. "You know," she said, hesitating, "last night, when I saw your son in the back seat, I thought nothing at that party made sense. The only thing that did was how he asked if I was sad, and how you held his hand." Brian didn't reply right away. He parked, pulled the brake, and turned just enough for her to see his face without it being too much. "Jake has a gift," he said with quiet pride. "He sees things without the messy parts. And me," he shrugged, "I just do what any dad would." "No," she shook her head. "Not everyone does. Not in my world. That's why—" She swallowed the word curious and chose another. "I wanted to call you today." He nodded, understanding more than she said. Silence lingered, a silence that didn't feel heavy. Isabel opened her bag, pulled out a card, wrote on the back, and slid it into the console. "If you ever—" She paused, picking her words carefully. "Need a ride outside the app or a coffee, call me. I'm terrible at making coffee, but I know good places. And I can listen, sometimes." Brian glanced at the card without touching it, like picking it up meant more than it looked. "I don't want to intrude," he said simply. "But thank you. And if you ever want to trade a fancy brunch for championship pancakes, we take guests. The test is tough. Jake votes. He's picky." "I like a challenge," Isabel smiled genuinely. "And I like 6-year-old judges. Then you're ahead already." She cleared a buzzing notification from her phone, and for a moment, instead of image meeting or reputation fallout, she felt the real urge to ask what it's like to live days that don't rely on social columns. She almost said, "Tell me about your week," but held back. "Thanks for the ride and the urban vibrotherapy," she joked, hand on the door handle. "Complimentary service," he replied. "Oh, and—" She turned back with one foot on the curb. "You know people will talk, right? About last night, about who I called today, they always talk." "People always talk," Brian agreed, calm. "I just need one person to talk. Jake's teacher saying he's doing fine. The rest is noise." Isabel nodded slowly, like tucking the words into an inside pocket she wouldn't lose on the first stumble. She stepped out. Before closing the door, she leaned in and said in a light but meaningful tone, "I don't like noise. I like voices. Yours, for now, sounds more like what I want to hear." The door shut, and Brian sat for a few seconds, watching her coat disappear into the building's lobby. The card remained on the console, quiet as a possibility. He picked it up, turned it over. A phone number and a quick, clumsy drawing of a heart with 2 smaller scribbles inside. It didn't look like a gossip column diva. It looked like someone trying to speak a new language. He tucked the card into his wallet, started the engine, and before accepting his next ride, sent a simple message. "Thanks for the conversation. Good luck at the studio. Tell them you prefer sweaters over jets if they ask." Her reply came with a grimace emoji, then the words, "Hoodies win," and "pancakes." Brian chuckled to himself, the sound filling the car like music. The afternoon flowed with the city's rhythm. Deliveries, a non-stop talking executive, a grandma reminiscing about her grandson in New Jersey, a tourist asking to stop whether hot dogs are good. Between rides, Brian stopped quickly at a store to buy a cheaper syrup. Not ideal, but it fit the budget, and headed to school as always, 5 minutes before the gates opened. Jake came out with blue paint on his hands, waving a soggy paper. "Dad, I painted a car that goes to space," he shouted, running into his arms. "Does it have a seatbelt?" Brian crouched to his level. "2, and a pillow so you don't hurt your neck." "There's my engineer." He ruffled the boy's hair and gently placed the drawing on the seat like it belonged in a museum. "Let's go home. I'm making pancakes tonight, and We might have a guest sometime, if you approve." "Who?" Jake's eyes widened with curiosity. "A new friend. She has strong opinions about sweaters and hoodies." "I like her already," Jake declared, knowing only what mattered. "But only if I get to pick the first pancake." "Deal." They drove home slowly, because sometimes slow is the only way to make life fit between rent and the pharmacy. At a stoplight, Brian glanced at the dash. The drawings, the water bottle, the card in his wallet, his son's reflection in the window. He thought about the girl from the Crystal Ballroom who preferred voices over noise, who asked about inhalers, who laughed down side streets. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a strategy. It was just the start of a different kind of conversation, the only thing he had time for, moments that suddenly felt bigger than hours. "Dad," Jake pointed to the sky between buildings. "Look, a piece of cloud shaped like a pancake." "See? The universe agrees." Brian turned on the signal and smiled to himself. And as the light changed, he knew that, unintentionally, unexpectedly, their worlds had started to touch in ways no map could show. Because maps don't chart what happens when someone asks if the inhaler is in the backpack and truly waits for the answer. "Dad, it's hard to breathe." Jake's weak voice cut through the silence in the car, interrupting the story he'd been excitedly telling just seconds before. Brian turned around instantly, heart racing. He saw the boy in the back seat, his small hand pressed against his chest, his face pale, eyes glassy. The high-pitched wheeze, the struggle with every breath. It was the start of a serious asthma attack. "Jake, stay calm. Take a deep breath, buddy." Brian was already reaching for the backpack, digging through the side pocket for the inhaler. "Hold tight for me, champ." But Jake's trembling hands couldn't coordinate the movement. Brian fumbled to fit the spacer in place, but he was too shaken, sweat already dripping down his forehead. That's when Isabel, who had been sitting beside him, leaned over the seat with surprising urgency. "Give it to me," she said firmly, taking the inhaler from his hands. "I know how to use it, Brian. Let me." She placed the mask over Jake's face and stayed calm, as if she'd trained for this moment. "That's it, Jake. Breathe, sweetheart. Slow. Think about pancakes. Remember the pancakes?" The boy's eyes widened, and between coughs, he tried to follow her voice. Isabel counted softly, gently holding his small hand, steady and kind. "Brian, we need to get him to a hospital now," she said, without taking her eyes off Jake. "This isn't going to hold for long." I know." Brian started the car, pulling out fast, hands shaking on the wheel. "The nearest ER is 20 minutes away, half an hour with traffic." "Don't worry about traffic, I'll handle that." Isabel grabbed her phone, dialed quickly, and spoke with a firmness that even surprised Brian. "Hello? This is Isabel Hayes. I need St. Mary's Emergency Department ready now. 6-year-old boy, severe asthma attack. Yes, we're on the way. 15 minutes. Prep the pediatric team, inhaler, oxygen, everything." While she spoke, Brian glanced over at her in disbelief. He hadn't expected to see this woman, used to galas and gowns, managing a real crisis like someone who had done it before. "They'll be waiting, Brian. Drive as fast as you can. I promise they'll clear a path." As if by magic, minutes later, a police siren wailed behind them. Isabel rolled down the window, held up her phone, and the patrol car pulled ahead, lights flashing to escort them. Brian ran red lights with no one daring to stop him. "Hang on, Jake," he said, voice tight with panic. "Daddy's here. We're almost there." Jake, weak, let out a faint smile as Isabel whispered, "You're going to have so many pancakes after this, you'll get sick of them." They screeched to a stop in front of the hospital. Nurses were already waiting with a gurney. Brian leapt out, scooping his son into his arms. Isabel ran beside him, barking instructions to the medical team like she belonged there. 6 years old, asthma history, inhaler administered in the car, no improvement, labored breathing, she said rapidly, barely stopping for breath. The doctors rushed Jake inside, leaving Brian and Isabel in the bright, sterile-smelling lobby. He was trembling, hands in his hair, pacing aimlessly. "I should have caught this sooner. I should have seen the signs," Brian murmured, his voice cracking. Isabel stepped in front of him, took hold of his shoulders, and made him stop. "Hey, look at me. You did everything you could. He's in good hands now. And if it weren't for you, that boy wouldn't have made it this far." His eyes welled with tears he tried to hold back. "You don't understand. It's always like this, always running behind, always afraid that—" His voice broke. "I can't lose him too." Isabel swallowed hard. She didn't know what to say, but for the first time in a long while, she realized she didn't need the perfect words. She just stood there, beside him, holding the weight of his silent fear. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor emerged. "He's stable. The inhaler helped, but we'll need to keep him under observation overnight. You'll be able to see him shortly." Brian let out a deep breath, nearly collapsing from relief. Isabel grabbed his arm to keep him steady. In the hospital room, Jake was already lying down, breathing with the help of oxygen. When he saw his dad, he gave a faint smile. "Daddy, I'm okay." Brian kissed his forehead, voice breaking. "You're my hero, kid." Isabel stood by the door, watching silently. Something shifted inside her, a quiet certainty. Real life was here. In the bonds of care, in the vulnerability of a father who didn't hide his fear, in the strength of a little boy with so much left to live. She, who had spent her life in gala dinners, surrounded by people who measured emotions in numbers and contracts, realized she might never have seen anything so genuine. And for the first time, she wished to be part of a story not written in headlines, but in small, honest acts of love. "Have you lost your mind, Isabel?" Henry Hayes's voice rang sharply through the dark, wood-paneled office, bouncing off the leather and glass bookcases. He rose from his chair, whiskey glass in hand, staring at his daughter like she'd betrayed him. "The press isn't even talking about the 20 rejected suitors anymore. The rumor now is that you were seen with a rideshare driver." Isabel kept her chin up, though her stomach churned. "What I do outside of your parties has nothing to do with the market, Dad." Henry let out a short, dry laugh. "Everything in your life is about the market, girl. Your last name isn't a personal choice. It's a brand." He slammed the glass onto the desk, splashing golden drops. "And if the public's interested in this driver, we'll use it to our advantage." Isabel blinked, confused. "What do you mean, use it to our advantage?" He opened a folder on the desk and slid some papers toward her. "A relationship, fake, of course. You and this Brian, the media will eat it up, the rebellious heiress and the humble driver. It humanizes your image, offsets the gala scandal, and gives us leverage to negotiate new deals." Her heart pounded. "Dad, you're talking about playing with his life. Brian's not some PR accessory. He has a son, real problems." "Exactly." Henry stepped closer, eyes gleaming with cold logic. "The public will melt over this asthmatic little boy that the rich heiress helped at the hospital. It's perfect. You come off as compassionate, Brian as the unlikely hero, and we control the story." Isabel clenched her fists. "I can't believe you're reducing a child to a marketing stunt." "You don't have to believe it. You just have to go along with it." His voice turned sharp, cutting. "Or would you prefer I shut off your accounts, your penthouse, your credit cards?" She stood up, swallowing her rage. "You can cut it all, but you can't make me lie to someone who doesn't deserve it." A heavy silence settled in the room before she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Brian opened the door of the modest Queen's apartment, still in his work clothes, hair tousled, face tired. "Isabel, what happened? You texted me, said it was urgent." He led her into the small living room, where a worn couch and a few scattered toys told the story of a life he protected fiercely. Jake was asleep on a little mattress nearby, breathing more easily after last night's attack. Isabel walked over, looking at the sleeping boy, and felt her resolve harden. "My father wants to turn you into a spectacle." Brian raised an eyebrow. "Come again?" She took a deep breath, eyes glassy. "He suggested a fake relationship between us, for the press, for the city. He thinks he can control your life, my life, and even use Jake as part of the narrative." Brian's expression hardened. "That's insane. I'm not a puppet for your family to play with, and I'm not exposing my son to that circus." "I know." Isabel stepped closer, almost pleading. "I hate the idea too, but Brian, they have so much power, and I thought maybe if we agreed to this for a little while, we could get you things you need." He narrowed his eyes. "What things?" "School, healthcare, stability." She spoke quickly, like she was afraid her courage would fade. "I can guarantee all of that for Jake, and you won't have to choose between medicine and rent anymore." Brian stepped back, breath heavy. "So that's it? You want to buy my dignity with favors?" "No," Isabel said firmly. "I want to help. I've seen you fighting alone, seen how you look at your son. It's not right that you carry this burden while my world wastes itself on useless things." He ran a hand over his face, not sure whether to yell or laugh at the situation. "Isabel, I don't need your charity. I just want to live in peace, give my son a decent life." She reached out, gently touching his arm. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a partnership, just for a few months. We handle the media circus together, and in return, I promise Jake will have everything he needs." Brian looked over at his sleeping son. The boy's chest rose and fell in a calm rhythm, and that image shattered every wall. He breathed deeply, torn between instinct and reality. "This is going to end badly," he muttered, not looking at her. "I can feel it." "Maybe it will," Isabel admitted, eyes locked on his. "But maybe it'll also teach us something neither of us ever imagined." The silence between them grew heavy, full of unspoken fears. Finally, Brian exhaled, defeated by the truth of their lives. "All right." His voice came out low, almost bitter. "I'll do it. But understand something, Isabel. It's not for you, not for your father, it's for Jake." She nodded, heart aching. "I know." And in that moment, they both understood they had just made a fragile, dangerous, but inevitable pact, one that promised not only chaos, but also revelations neither of them could yet foresee. "Hold my arm, Brian," Isabel whispered, smiling nervously as she adjusted the gold clutch in her hands. They stood at the grand entrance of the Metropolitan Club in New York, under the relentless flashes of photographers. The red carpet shimmered beneath the artificial lights, and dozens of elite guests strolled toward the towering doors, clad in flawless gowns and tuxedos. Brian swallowed hard. The rented tux felt too tight in the shoulders, and his bow tie was already slightly crooked. "This place is a minefield," he murmured, without moving his lips. "I'm pretty sure I'm going to step on someone important within 10 minutes. Isabel let out a quick, nervous laugh and whispered back, "If it happens, just smile like it's part of your charm. Trust me, that might impress more people than you think." He didn't look convinced. The two of them stepped into the ballroom, surrounded by long tables draped in silver and crystal. As they passed the first row, Brian stumbled slightly over the plush carpet, nearly pulling Isabel with him. Sorry," he said aloud, trying to recover. "This place should come with a user manual." A few guests let out restrained chuckles, but Isabel noticed something surprising. Instead of disdain, many faces lit up with unexpected warmth at his sincerity. "Just breathe," she said, squeezing his arm as she guided him to their table. "Remember, wine on the right, water on the left." Brian sat down, stared at the sea of silverware, sighed, and said out loud, unaware that half the table could hear him, "I thought this was dinner, not a geography test." One of the older men nearby, a silver-haired magnate long used to flattery, let out a genuine laugh. "I like this guy. Finally someone says what we're all thinking." The remark drew more laughter around the table, and Isabel, surprised, began to realize something. Brian's unfiltered honesty was cutting through the stiffness of the room. When the waiter served the first course, some elaborate French dish with an unpronounceable name, Brian watched closely. He picked up the wrong fork, and when he caught Isabel's look, he just shrugged. "It's all forks, right?" he said, prompting an even louder wave of laughter. Isabel covered her mouth, trying to hide her smile, but her eyes sparkled. Beneath the initial embarrassment, she started to recognize something magnetic in his simplicity. The guests, so used to rehearsed speeches and polished manners, were genuinely charmed by a man who wasn't trying to be perfect. Midway through the evening, during a toast, the host of the ceremony approached their table. "And here we have Miss Hayes with her. Special guest," the MC said, turning the mic toward Brian. "Sir, would you like to say a few words?" Isabel nearly choked on her drink. She tried to signal him to just smile and wave, but Brian was already standing, straightening his crooked bow tie. "Well, I don't have much to say. To me, a fancy dinner has always meant rice, beans, and chicken, so if I mess up the forks, I hope you'll forgive me." He paused, looked at Isabel, and added, "But I can promise you I don't mess up the things that matter, like taking care of my son and respecting the person by my side." A brief silence fell over the ballroom, followed by unexpected applause. Isabel froze for a moment, her heart pounding. Then it hit her. The crowd didn't want another flawless millionaire. They wanted something real. And Brian, awkward and genuine, was the very definition of authenticity. She smiled, feeling a new warmth bloom in her chest. The risky arrangement that had once seemed destined for disaster had just revealed its first unexpected truth. Together, they worked better than either of them had ever imagined. "You burned it again!" Jake's little voice echoed through the kitchen between fits of laughter as smoke rose from the skillet. Isabel coughed, fanning the air with a pot lid. "I swear it was going to work this time." But the batter stuck. Brian rushed in, dish towel in hand, and rescued the pan like it was a high-stakes mission. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Manhattan's first carbonized pancake." He held up the blackened disc and clicked his tongue. "Perfect for use as a shield in case of alien invasion." Jake burst into laughter, nearly knocking over his glass of milk. Isabel, mortified, laughed too, wiping her forehead. "Pancakes are not my strong suit." "But persistence is," Brian teased, pouring a fresh batch of batter into the pan. "And persistence, in pancakes or in life, always pays off." The afternoons that followed were filled with scenes Isabel never would have imagined. Instead of gala gowns, she was sitting beside Jake at the small dining table, helping him glue magazine clippings into his school notebook. "Is this a whale?" she asked, frowning at a lopsided drawing. "No, it's Daddy," Jake replied seriously, slathering glue across the page. "Hey!" Brian protested from the kitchen, apron still dusted with flour. "If I look like a whale, then you're my baby dolphin." Jake broke into giggles again, and Isabel couldn't help herself. Her laughter came out so naturally, so freely, that it surprised even her. On a sunny Sunday, the three of them went to the park. Isabel, without heels, without magazine cover makeup, chased after the soccer ball Jake kicked across the grass. Her loose hair flew wildly behind her, and she shouted with joy in a way she hadn't since her teenage years. Brian watched from a distance, sitting on a bench, shaking his head. "She's going to ruin that fancy coat sliding around in the grass," he muttered. But when he saw her slip and land on the ground, laughing alongside Jake, he realized there was nothing to ruin. That was the point. This was real, unfiltered, spontaneous. Evenings revealed even more. After Jake was tucked in, Brian and Isabel sat in the small living room, sharing reheated coffee and late-night stories. She spoke about family pressure, hollow suitors, the emptiness of gala nights. He talked about odd jobs, sleepless nights during asthma flare-ups, and the constant fear of not being enough. "You talk about him all the time," Isabel said once, watching the tired man whose eyes still held that spark. "And it's beautiful, the way your whole world revolves around Jake." Brian exhaled, looking up at the ceiling. "He's all I have, all that really matters." Her heart squeezed in her chest. In the middle of the laughter, the kitchen disasters, the drawings scattered on the floor, she was beginning to see more than a temporary arrangement. She was beginning to see something she barely had the courage to name, a real bond, growing slowly, quietly, but undeniably. And yet, when the chemistry showed itself in lingering glances or suspended smiles, they both looked away. Because after all, this was just an arrangement. At least, that's what they told themselves every night before falling asleep. "Look, Daddy!" Jake ran through the store, hugging a new t-shirt to his chest. "This one has a dinosaur!" Isabel smiled as she walked between racks of children's clothes. Dinosaurs are always the best choice. She tucked her hair behind her ear, balancing a tiny jacket over her arm. Brian watched from nearby, hesitant. "Isabel, you didn't have to buy all this. He already has." "He has very little," she interrupted, firm but gentle. "And kids grow fast. Besides, seeing him smile like that, that's priceless." Jake spun in front of the mirror, laughing at himself in the oversized shirt. His light, carefree laughter filled the store like music. 2 days later, the first photos began popping up on gossip sites. Isabel, elegant, walking out of the store holding Jake's hand. Another one showed her carrying shopping bags beside Brian. The headline screamed, "Opportunistic driver exploits heiress Hayes to dress his son on her dime." Brian saw the article on his phone while waiting for a ride. His stomach churned, his face flushed with heat. "Damn it," he muttered, shutting off the app. That evening, Isabel arrived at his place with a tired smile. She found Brian sitting at the table, phone in front of him, his expression closed off. "You saw it," she said quietly. "I saw it," he replied, his voice hard. "And I saw that you didn't say a thing, not a single word defending us." Isabel took a deep breath, nervous. "If I ran to put out every rumor, it would only fuel them. My father always said—" "Your father always said," Brian cut in, eyes flashing. "It's always about image, about contracts, about business. But what about me? About Jake?" She stepped closer. "You think I don't care? That it doesn't hurt to see that? Hurts less than losing your party invites." He let out a bitter laugh and stood up. "Isabel, deep down, you still see me as less. The driver, the simple man who stumbled into your perfect little luxury life." "That's not true," her voice cracked. "I see you. I see the incredible father you are, the man carrying the weight of the world on his own. But you don't have the courage to say it out loud, not in front of them." Brian stared at her, steady. "When it mattered most, you hid." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Isabel reached out to touch his arm, but he stepped back. The look of disappointment on Brian's face cut deeper than any words. Jake appeared in the hallway, sleepy-eyed. "Daddy, is everything okay?" Brian took a breath and forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy, everything's fine. Go back to sleep." The boy obeyed, though he glanced back once more, his eyes unsure, before closing the bedroom door. Isabel felt the sting of tears. "Brian, I didn't want this to happen." But it did. He turned away, his voice low, hurt. "And if it keeps going like this, I'm going to lose you before I ever get the chance to believe I had you." She stood, frozen, speechless, as he walked away and disappeared through the door. In that moment, Isabel realized she might be on the verge of losing the only man who had ever truly seen her, beyond her last name. And for the first time in years, she was terrified of being truly alone. "Don't do this, Isabel!" Henry's voice rang out behind her, firm and commanding, but she was already walking down the red carpet toward the main stage. The ballroom, once again filled with New York's elite, fell into stunned silence as the spotlight turned to her. Isabel held the microphone with trembling hands, but her gaze was steady. Her dress shimmered under the lights, but for the first time, she didn't care about the image or the headlines waiting in the wings. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "I've spent my whole life being introduced as the Heiress. As if I were nothing more than a last name, a net worth, a chess piece in someone else's business game. And for a long time, I accepted that role." Some guests glanced at each other, shifting uncomfortably. Photographers moved in closer, capturing every word. Henry clenched his jaw, powerless. Isabel took a deep breath. But then, one ordinary night, I met someone who didn't ask me for anything, a man who didn't care about contracts or money or image. He just wanted to care for his son, fight for him every single day, with a courage I've never seen in anyone. She paused, searching the crowd. Her eyes found Brian, standing near the entrance in a simple tuxedo, staring at her in disbelief. "That man showed me what real love looks like." Her voice cracked, but she held steady. "Not the kind of love my father tried to arrange, not the 20 suitors lined up for a deal. Real love, made of care, of patience, of burned pancakes in the kitchen and crayon drawings taped to the dashboard of an old car." A murmur spread through the room. Isabel lifted her chin, resolute. "I love Brian. I love his son, Jake. And if that scandalizes some people, maybe it's because they've been stuck behind appearances for far too long." A heavy silence followed. Then the first timid claps, which grew and swelled into full applause. Brian, overwhelmed, took a few steps forward. His heart thundered in his chest. "Isabel," he murmured when they stood face to face. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "I don't care about last names or contracts, Brian. I just want you and Jake." He hesitated, his voice tight with emotion. "I've always been afraid I'd never be enough. That one day you'd look at me and see just the driver who doesn't belong in your world." Isabel held his hands tightly. "You're so much more than enough. You're my world. And together, we're a family." The ballroom erupted in applause as the two kissed, unapologetically, under the stunned eyes of the elite. Henry stormed out, furious, but no one cared. From the middle of the crowd, a small figure broke through and ran up to them. Jake, in a coat slightly too big for him, wrapped his arms around them both at once. "So now it's the three of us?" he asked, his eyes shining. "Yes, it is," Isabel said, stroking his hair. Brian, with tears in his eyes, kissed his son's head, then Isabel's forehead. "It's the beginning of everything." And there, in front of everyone, the heiress who had turned down 20 millionaire suitors finally found what none of them could offer: a home, a true family, and a love that couldn't be bought or measured in numbers.
What it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.